Welcome to the Get Out Swim podcast, where we discuss all aspects of competitive swimming. I'm Seamus T. Quinn, and I'm a former Division I swimmer and current college and age group swim coach. Today, I'm joined by Coach Peter Linn. Peter is a specialty coach and program mentor at Coronado Swim Team Elite. He primarily works with the senior elite and high performance groups. Before moving to the Coronado area, Peter spent 31 seasons as head coach at Eastern Michigan University. He took over the men's program ahead of the 1988-89 season, leading it until it was cut from the school's athletic programs in 2018. He led the women's team beginning in the 04-05 season. Peter is the winningest coach in EMU history. During his tenure, the Eagles accrued 26 Mid-American Conference championships, including 8 in a row from 1988 to 1996. For more than 19 seasons, Peter's teams did not lose a MAC dual meet. Overall, he was named MAC Men's Swimming Coach of the Year 8 times, while coaching 13 MAC Men's Swimmers of the Year. Furthermore, he was named MAC Women's Swimming Coach of the Year twice and coached 5 MAC Women's Swimmers of the Year. Peter was the recipient of the 2018 National Collegiate and Scholastic Trophy from the College Swimming and Diving Coaches Association of America. The trophy is the highest honor from the organization. That season, Delaney Duncan became the school's first ever female NCAA A-finalist, and she went on to place second at NCAAs in the 100 breast in 2019. Linn attended EMU himself from the 1969 to 1974 seasons, and as a swimmer helped the team to a pair of NAIA team titles in 1970 and 1971, and the 1972 NCAA Division II championship. Peter and I could have talked for hours. I couldn't help but have a smile on my face as Peter recounted some of his favorite memories from coaching at both the high school and the collegiate level. Peter is as passionate about the sport of swimming as any, and more importantly, he deeply values the mentorship of his athletes. When I asked Peter what he's most proud of, he said above it all, it was watching the athletes become great human beings. So without further ado, enjoy my conversation with Coach Peter Linn. Welcome to another episode of the Get Out Swim podcast. I'm your host, Seamus T. Quinn, and today I'm joined by Coach Peter Linn. So Peter was a longtime head coach at Eastern Michigan University, and now I believe is coaching with Team Elite. And so just super excited to have you on, Peter. Thanks for joining.
Glad to be here. It's always fun to talk about swimming.
Yeah, I'm excited to learn about your story. You were recommended by Coach Greg Perini, who I recorded a podcast about a couple weeks ago with that is out now. And, one name was mentioned when I asked for a recommendation, and that was you. He said, me and Peter have a long history of just, talking swimming and bouncing ideas off of each other and just being, colleagues and friends in this space of coaching. And so, So I think this is going to make for a great conversation, and certainly you have just a lifeline of coaching and experience to share with all of us. So why don't we start? Where are you kind of zooming in from here? Where are you currently situated?
Currently, I'm in San Diego. I relocated here after I retired from Eastern. I was going to retire here regardless, but at the same time I went to move here. Dave Marsh got wind of apparently from John Urbanchek that I was moving and hounded me for all 4 days of an ASCA clinic to help with the pro team. And so when I first got here in the fall of 2019, basically my job was, to show up a few times a week, help him out, assist, learn some stuff myself, and help with the athletes there. What happened is that in the course of the time that we were here, the pro athletes pretty much dissipated after the 21 trials. Most of them had other things they were doing. They were international athletes, and they came here then, and then moved afterwards, or some of them retired after the Olympics. And the club team itself combined with what had been at one point the Coronado Naval Association, and then was Coronado Swimming, so it became Coronado Swimming Team Elite. And so that's the club team that I've been being a modern elder, to quote Jack Roach, person with since that time, since 2021.
Nice. That's awesome. So now the team, how big would you say this Coronado Team Elite team has grown to about now?
I have no idea.
Fair enough.
I think we're in the neighborhood of about 250 athletes.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know. I think it was a little bigger at one point. I think we had a number of athletes who went off to college last year or in college this year. We lost some of those with Dave's move to Berkeley. We don't really have a pro group per se. We
Okay.
have we have some postgraduate athletes, but it's not the same as when Dave was here.
So are there any athletes now who you coach with that are kind of have aspirations of making, Olympics, Olympic trials, or just really geared up for this Olympic summer
Oh
season?
yeah, definitely. I mean, they're different levels. We have one athlete represents Micronesia, and he recently won Guam's and their first gold medals in the Pacific Games that were in the Solomon Islands, and he is going to Tokyo. And then I work closely with an athlete named Nick Mahabir, who he's a U.S. citizen, but he's got dual citizenship. He represents Singapore internationally. He went 59 last summer in the 100-meter breaststroke.
Oh wow.
And so he he wants, his aspirations are make that A cut and then make it to the meet and then do something, and he just turned 18, so
Wow, 18 years old going 59 100-meter breaststroke. That's
I think he
impressive.
had mono when he did it too, so
Oh, so he's got some more in store for him
yeah,
come this year.
yeah, very talented young man.
Awesome. And as a coach, do you find that you cater like well towards maybe one stroke over another? Like obviously, you have massive amounts of coaching experience, probably countless people to bounce ideas off of, but is there like one stroke that just you feel the best that you can convey to your athletes?
I'm not sure. If I were answering for myself, I would say no.
Hmm.
If you ask a whole lot of other people, they would probably say breaststroke.
Okay.
And
Interesting.
the reason I say no is that I have sort of, I feel like I have a pretty good grasp of what I would hope, or at least the things I look at, regardless of what stroke they're swimming. But I
Hmm.
feel like uh, breaststroke is a more misunderstood stroke, maybe in some ways than some of the other ones are, because it's the one that's kind of the odd man out. Your feet have to go different ways and so on. And as a result, I feel like, even though I feel very comfortable whether I was have a butterfly backstroke, breaststroke, or freestyle, I seem to have accumulated maybe a little more success in breaststroke than is normally seen, and as a result of that, maybe it's just one of those events that people pay less attention to in general or something. But I would say no. But I think other people would differ with that.
Mm, interesting. All right. Well, I'm always curious because I feel like as a coach personally, I just probably resonate the most with like backstrokers. But
Sure.
I feel like at this point you can kind of mold your coaching style with stroke work to any athlete. So I think that's a nice answer. Question for you now. So is there anything you do in your training at Team Elite that really is sort of a you feel like is a game changer for your athletes? Like, is there anything you're doing now, as you prepare for the Olympic cycle and sort of this upcoming summer, or even as you're working with athletes, and it could be in breaststroke or, anything that you feel like is something that you, I don't know, keep coming back to, or something that you strongly believe is a kind of like a catalyst for your summer success?
I think maybe I would say that, like, to individualize things actually.
Mm,
I feel like there's enough variation between what each athlete needs is to try to accommodate their individual needs. I know at one point we could ask each athlete and say, if you could pick one set, that if you could do this set, you would feel like, okay, I am really ready to go here.
Mm.
And, if you had 20 athletes, you might have 15 different sets. There'd be some duplication, but there wouldn't be a lot. And so in some ways, you just like, okay, well, we're going to make sure that you can do this particular set well. But I think the biggest thing is just, attention to detail,
Mm.
is that it's real easy. You have to always remember that you're not really trying to get them to go. The meet isn't going to be about who can have the best average for 10 100s or something. It's going to be who has the best 100.
Right.
And you have to keep those kinds of goals in mind. But I think attention to detail, not letting them slip into bad technique,
Mm.
as best you can. Sometimes they're pretty determined to do that, but but nonetheless, I think that it's really trying to pay attention to a lot of the small things that are going on. It's everybody shows up. I used to talk to him and was like, okay, and I stole this from someone. I think Wayne Goldsmith, but I think it's Goldsmith. But anyway, where it was like, if you say, "Well, go 10 100s on 130," then everybody, okay, great. Well, but somebody does those with 6 kicks off every wall. Somebody does them
Mm.
streamline. Somebody has a different breathing pattern. Those are all different sets.
Right.
And somebody gets their time after they touch the wall. They touch the wall and ask the coach for a time. Somebody's looking at the clock as they're a yard out, gliding into the wall and saying, "Yeah, I went my goal time." So
Right.
I think the details, and particularly like with pace, uh, being pretty specific about it. It's not, pace. We use tempo trainers a lot.
Mm.
And I use them for like race pacing, actually, because if you leave the wall on a beep on one of these things and then it's set for the race pace, they better have their hand or their feet on the wall at the other end. If it beeps before they get there, you didn't swim fast enough. But the
Mm.
difference between being, 135 200 freestyler and a 138 or a 145 and a 148 is minuscule. I mean, it's, you could clap your hands and if you're talking about a 25 or a 50, and that would be the difference when you add it up. And so sacrificing a little bit all the time and thinking you're doing the right thing. You get to the end of the year, you touch the wall, look up, and you're 148, and you thought you were going to go 145. Your teammate who did everything right goes 144.9, and you're going, but I did everything he did. So I think paying attention to details like that is really is one of the key things that you can do as a coach. You can't just sit there and say, "Oh, okay, we're going 10 100s best average," and then be a talking stopwatch for the next 15 minutes.
Mm. Yeah. I think that's a great answer. I certainly feel like there's so much, maybe obscurity to like, yeah, something a set like 10 100s where it's like, okay, well, you have all these different athletes that could swim it a different way or focus on something else. So, like, what are you actually going to focus on within a 10 100s to, maybe make the most out of that set? So I think attention to detail makes sense to me because it's
Yeah,
like
I
picking.
mean, and again, I'm very for. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm very fortunate, because I have a kind of a one-on-one thing going with Nick. But I mean, we were doing, if we do sets, generally, if we're doing a 50 repeats, let's say short course meters, um, not only are we getting all his times, but we know what his stroke count was both directions.
Mm.
We know what his rotation time was on his turns, and generally know what his stroke rate was. And that's every
Right.
50 of every, if we did 1850s, all that data would be on every one. And so when you look at from session to session, it gives you a lot more data. I mean, you also look at their resting heart rate. So you could even be the same time. Everything could be the same. Your resting heart rate is lower or you recover faster. You're getting better. If you don't know that, you just say, well, I'm not making any progress.
Sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. And when it comes to making a plan for training, like let's say you're, developing a set for tomorrow's practice or something, is that what is your process like for making a plan of training? It could be a season plan or even just, a week's plan. Like, is it something that you need time to sort of organize and think about and really like detail, with the athletes you're working with now, or do you make adaptations on the fly too? Is it something where you might look at what's in
I
front of you?
used to be really regimented. I used to like, okay,
Mm.
this is it. I mean, I could like, okay, I could write out all the practice for a month or something. Don't do this at home. Okay, I'm just warning people, don't. But in general, as I accumulated more information, read more about exercise physiology, I have broad strokes plans. I know roughly how long I want to spend and how I'm going to test, say, aerobic capacity. And I know roughly how long I'm going to uh, need to develop, the anaerobic side of things. And it's real ballpark. And
Mm.
what I do is try to set up, and it varies from athlete to athlete, but try to set up a program in which when they do it, I basically look at in broad strokes in terms of like weeks or like a season or months or however that might go. But then during the week, I might say, well, okay, coming in Monday, they're pretty fresh. So, I'll look at Monday and Tuesday and I might write some stuff up and think about how I want to do it and how else I want to test what they're doing to see if we're making progress. But after that, then I'm like on Wednesday is usually going to be recovery day a lot of times for some of the programs we're in. And you sit back and say, okay, now what did that actually look like? And as a result of that, then I'm going to sit down and say, well, what are we going to do on, like Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, and then sit back. And so I kind of work in a couple of day cycles, where I have a
Mm.
kind of a general idea what I want to do, and then write something up, and then adjust it as I go, and then individually in a workout, I'll look at it, but I'm never quite sure how much I want to change it, because sometimes I can just be having a bad day. I'm tired. I don't feel very good. I'm standing on the pool deck and I don't want that to carry over me thinking, well, this isn't going very well. Maybe I'm just not actually doing a very good job conducting the workout. So I want to make sure that, I'm paying real close attention to, what's actually going on with the athletes in the pool. And I have gone into workouts where I've said, okay, you go over there and just float, you do this, you do that, and just, I have to usually be around some athletes for quite a while to get to the point where I'm real comfortable with that.
Mm.
But that's, that's ideally the kind of the goal where you can kind of read them and say, okay, we can go a little bit farther, or yeah, you're done, go home, take a shower, sprinter comes in and I'll spray him with a hose or something and go home, you know,
Right.
which I've
Yeah.
done.
Well, yeah, I remember our college coach used to just spray the hose on the sprinters if they wouldn't get in the water. It was like turning on the
No, I
cold
just
water
spray it on them and tell them to go home.
and tell them to go home. That's great.
You've been wet for today.
Yeah, that's your water workout for the day.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
that's funny. And I guess one question I have comes to mind is like, how freeing does it feel to move on from, sort of being the head of a collegiate program of both a men's and women's program, where you're managing like two, pretty big teams for an extensive period of time, like you did, and then go into more personalized, individualized coaching, where you're sort of roped in by Dave Marsh to come help. And then like, what did that feeling,
Oh,
what did
it's
that
great.
feel like?
No,
Yeah.
it's great. It's wonderful
Mm.
because when I first took the job at Eastern, I remember asking Mike Jones about it, and he said something like, coaching is like this much of the job, right? Um, and he wasn't probably far off,
Mm.
in the sense of, all the other things, so you're running, particularly now at Division I level, you're running a small business.
Mm.
You got customers, you've got, you've got a budget to manage, you've got to recruit personnel, you got to produce a product, and when you're dealing with your life, um, and reputation resting on the whims of 18 to 20-year-olds, there's an underlying tension to all that as well.
Right.
So, where you can get back. I mean, one of the things I noticed when I first went to Eastern, there was not an assistant coach.
Mm.
You were the head coach, and that was it. You coached, You did all the recruiting, you did everything. You did literally everything. I mean, you got the buses, you got, in fact, when you used to use state vehicles, you drove the vehicle, I mean, you did the whole thing. And the athletes didn't have anywhere else to turn. I mean, they can't go complain about you to the assistant coach or something. So I mean, you interact with them in a different way. And then then we had a couple of grad assistants, and then we had one assistant coach, and then we had two assistant coach full time, and then three, and then and kept going up, right? But every one of those adds a layer between you and the athletes, and you and just being on deck coaching. And no matter how much you try to do it, you can't avoid it. And I don't think it gets to the football model where the head coach is really the media guy and coaches the coaches entirely, and the coaches do everything else. It's different, and it's nice just to get back and actually coach, as opposed to worrying about recruiting, worrying about your budget, worrying about fundraising, worrying about what your athletes are doing tonight or this weekend, or who's sick, or I mean, you do worry about the athletes, but in a totally different way. And of course, you've got parents as allies, as opposed to, or you're dealing with professionals, and the professional athletes that we've had out here with Team Elite were wonderful. I mean, I think Dave was pretty restrictive in terms of who he invited to join, but they were so good about taking responsibility for their actions and taking ownership of what they were doing in the water. And I think that's a big thing that a lot of people miss out on. They expect someone to come and tell them what the answer is, or if I wear this suit, or if I swim for this coach, that I'm going to go really, really fast. And you deal with these professional athletes, and they have developed a really fine sense of what it is they need to do and how they need to do it. And they know how much work it is, and they're very committed to that process and take responsibility for the outcome of that process. And that's a big change. It also is one of the reasons I think they're as successful as they are.
Yeah. Are there any professional athletes that you worked with, like within Team Elite, that you feel like you learned a lot from, or you maybe admired the way that they, I don't know, just like took agency over their sort of, swimming and being a professional athlete?
I mean, God, this would be terrible because I mean, there's just like almost any of them, to be honest with you. I mean, that's the honest truth. I mean, I feel like I'd be leaving somebody out,
right?
If I said that. I will say that one of the most impressive things that I saw was how amazing Kathleen Baker was in the summer of 2021, when just before the trials she broke her ankle, and that's such a setback. And to watch her be as positive as she was, and ultimately come as close as she did to making the team when she was swimming amazingly well. That was kind of a unique, but in terms of just taking responsibility and knowing things, I mean, I work with Marius Kush, who's trains with I think out of Indiana's pro group now. And I remember doing something with him, and I was talking to him about stroke rate. And I don't know. I mean, it was like literally the first day I'd met him. He came on and introduced himself. He had not been there. He'd been out of town, had been in Germany or something, came back. And he introduced himself, and we were talking about stroke rate. And he goes, "Oh, no, when I race, I'm 1.10. Okay. I was like, great. But I mean, he knew, but that's the kind of thing he knew, and going back, because I spent a long time with Club Wolverine in Ann Arbor, and again, watching myriad, professional athletes go through there as well. Peter Vanderkay sticks out in my mind, actually, as somebody who was just like an amazing person in terms of like how he changed, developed, and then how he conducted himself as a professional. But again, everybody who gets to a really high level like that, it would be hard to differentiate,
Right.
what happens with them, that they're better, because that's actually maybe the key to how they get there. So that's kind of the entry, level, commitment. You have to take complete responsibility, for being an athlete 24/7, and what you're going to talk to people about, what you're going to talk to yourself about, what you're going to put in your body, what kind of sleep you're going to get. I mean, if you really train them, as a college athlete, they're supposed to only be in contact, 20 hours a week. I mean, that would be like seeing somebody for 20 hours on Saturday and then not seeing him till the next Saturday, and then thinking, okay, all my success and everything boils down to whatever happened last Saturday, and not what happened Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And so I think that's kind of the entry level position. You take really basic responsibilities for everything that goes on in your training.
Yeah. Yeah, and it goes back to your point about just like attention to detail. I feel like that, that's translatable to these professionals, because, probably everything is detail for them, and in terms of their routine, their responsibility, their
Oh
feeling
yeah,
for the water. Yeah.
I did a set, and I don't remember the exact nature of the set, with a Christian Galameyev, who's I think Bulgarian ethnically, but he's Greek national. I swam at Alabama, but he was doing his pro stuff here. I think he was best finished. I think he's second in the worlds in the 50. And we were doing, we had actually a funny pool, so it was like a 33-meter pool, and he was doing 33-meter sprints. And if he missed on one or two, I think if he missed two, then we were going to be done. And he missed two. And his immediate response was, yeah, but I missed because I didn't touch the wall. I used the wrong hand to touch the wall, so that doesn't count. So he kept going. I mean, that's the kind of thing we're talking about.
Right. Yeah. 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 I feel like, because at that point you're such a seasoned swimmer that, like, it's not just going through the motions at this point. You have to find ways to really be in tune with your stroke counter, your stroke rate, or like
Right.
you brought up Marius or
Yes.
Christian here. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I think there's a certain kind of athlete that I've seen over the years where I've always felt like they felt like training was some sort of hazing that you had to go through to be able to participate. The connection between actually what they did in the water and how they performed wasn't as clear to them maybe as it should have been.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I was just listening. I mean, now being removed from being a college swimmer myself, like I just swam earlier today, and I'm literally, I keep going in my head, like it's so much different for me now to look at the perspective of swimming as, like, feeling the water, feeling, little movements on my catch and my freestyle or my backstroke, or things I didn't think about as a collegiate athlete. And by no fault of any of, my coaches and stuff. It's just, I don't think I had the awareness to really put it to, to the connection in my body. And now from the coaching side, as I've coached more and I'm starting to think about it, I'm like, I get frustrated in the sense where I'm like, if I had known this when I was a swimmer, I've gone through the most brutal sets and the most intense workouts and all of these things, and I like very rarely ever thought about my position of my catch and my backstroke, or how deep my my elbow would drop before I would pull and follow through on my backstroke. So small things where it's like, I don't know, it sometimes infuriates me, because I'm like, I wish I had known this earlier. But at the same time, it's nice to now be on the coaching side of things and really try and, I would say, implement that within, the training and the perspective that I'm giving to the athletes now, even at a young age. Try and make them understand why it's important to feel, certain positions in the water, as opposed to just having them grind out, I don't know, intense aerobic based sets, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely.
But anyways, it's fascinating to me. I don't know, what is your feeling on that? Just, I was listening to, I think it was a Brett Hawk, Matt Grievers podcast the other day, where Grievers was talking about just how, how if he were to go back in time, maybe, because I think Brett asked him the question of, like, by the end of your career, what are things you think that could be, I don't know, applicable to young swimmers, and sort of how they can develop from your own experience. And he said, well, just really, feeling the water, like sort of quality over quantity, just the whole notion of like we can really develop a good sense of the water if we just think about like certain positions and how we're actually going to move through the water, as opposed to just like, I don't know, going at an intense rate without actually having intention, and like kind of to your point earlier into what I just spoke about. So I don't know, what is your feeling on, even if you were to look back at like some of the training that you have given over the years, and like where you're at now and what you are continuing to learn? Kind of a broad question, but
Well, I mean, I think it's interesting question, because there's a lot of different factors to it.
yeah.
One of the best books that I ever came across, I think there was a book called, I mean, I got to think about it for a second, but I think it was like Coaching the Age Group Swimmer or something like this. This is about a 40-year-old book.
Mhm.
But one of the things that struck me about it was that what the author of the book did, and I think as authors, I think there were a couple of them, but what they did is talk about developing athletes in a very unique sense in terms of what you see normally, and that was to look at three things they were talking about developing, physiologically, chronologically, and emotionally or psychologically. And then they looked at different ages and what was, might be appropriate for that age. If you talk to a 7-year-old about team culture or something, they're like, really, really, um, but if you talk, but if you do a lot of anaerobic work, for example, with a 10-year-old or 11-year-old, 12-year-old, that's not really going to do you much either, because their muscle type doesn't change for till puberty or something, or that neighborhood.
Mm.
And other than that, they're usually slow twitch. So there, it talks about the kind of windows that you have to work on certain things or emphasize certain things. But
Mm.
I always felt like some of the volume in swimming was less about, without actually realizing this, was less about actually building up some sort of endurance than it was to get someone familiar with like working in an alien environment, learning, as you said, learning how to move in the water, learning how where your hands and your feet are and what they're doing. And because I think all those types of things are what make you capable eventually of being, an elite athlete, if you're as you perfect them. So
Mm.
I would say that addressing whatever would be the appropriate energy systems and things like that from a training standpoint, but from a skill level, obviously learning something correctly and learning how to move in the water and developing a feel for the water. And I think that's one of those things, again, it gets lost. I mean, some people have great feel for the water, some people don't, but some people can develop it. If you talk about teaching, hitting a baseball or something, hitting a curveball, maybe somebody can hit it immediately. Someone else learns to hit it, but once that person's learned to hit it, they can both hit it, right? I mean, it's the
Right.
same skill now. So
Right.
I think as you deal with athletes, taking them through that sort of learn to swim correctly process.
Mm.
Um, I actually, when I first moved to Columbus, Ohio, I learned that the then age group coach for the club team was an elementary school teacher.
Wow.
And he spent maybe half of a practice doing weird dry land stuff. I mean, they'd crab walk around, they would do cartwheels, and they would do all sorts of different, almost like mini gymnastic things, just being better people on dry land, how to do a
Mm.
headstand, how do you do the, and they get in the water and you teach them how to do something technically. And I mean, honestly, I looked at the times of like the 12-year-olds or 13-year-olds, and I'm like, oh my God, we're going to be so bad in a couple of years. These guys, and the guy who was kind of helping my transition there was still a friend, Ty Grant. He goes, no, wait till you give them some work. And he was right. I mean, it was like pouring gasoline on a fire. I mean, it was amazing
Wow.
how much better those kids got.
Mm.
from a performance standpoint, but it was all based on that initial, learning to be, a skilled athlete, learning how to move in the water, learning how to, and they had fun, which also was a positive thing too. But
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like your point there, just about kind of what the book mentions. Like you have to factor in the age groups, the energy systems, like where are these swimmers at physiologically, but then also, where are they at, like in terms of mentally too, like their sort of,
yeah, it's a
brain
terrific book.
development.
Yeah, it's a terrific book that way, and
Mm,
when I say chronologically, the thing they were talking about training age and biological age, looking at those two things as
right.
well as some other aspects of it.
Yeah. No, I think it's fascinating. I mean, even as an age group coach now, like I'm coaching primarily 10, 11, 12 year olds. And I just, I try and have them think about, again, just skill building, drills, implementing their feel for the water. And like you said, sort of incorporating some fun. Like I might even just play games with them because there's, at the end of the day, they're looking to have some longevity. I'm hoping that they will have some longevity in this sport. So I want to make it fun for them, while also maybe playing tricks to introduce some hard work. And yeah, I don't know. I constantly think about it because it's like I don't want them to burn out. I don't want them to lose a love for the sport. So I also want to make it engaging and fun, and have them think about stuff while they're going through their motions.
You can do things like, I mean, play games underwater with a hockey puck or something. They learn to hold their breath, but they're just down there trying to, like, score a goal, right?
Right,
And
right.
you got to keep the puck on the bottom of the pool.
Yep, yep. Yeah, so it's just finding ways to almost trick them into doing some some hard work, or things that will eventually build their capacity to swim more and more efficiently. So yeah, it's interesting. Well, anyways, I'll kind of backtrack. I'd love to learn more about your introduction to swimming and sort of coaching. So why don't you just tell me and tell the listeners about your background in the sport of swimming, sort of how it started, and then how you got into coaching, and like maybe who were some of those early mentors, that inspired you to get into coaching in the first place.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I mean, the easy part about is getting into swimming. My dad they built a now defunct swim club. It was like somebody's idea of like, well, you have tennis clubs and all these things. Well, we're gonna have the swim club and we're gonna have this kind of private pool and have memberships. And it was down at the end of the street. And um, my dad bought a family membership, and so I would go down there. And this is probably when I was, you know, 10, 11, 12, somewhere in that range. So it wasn't like real early on or anything. And they had a team, and so I sort of joined, and I mean, I didn't do anything special, but I just kind of hung out, and I don't have any real serious memories of it actually at that point. Just knew that I did it. When I went to high school, everybody seemed to be joining a sports team, and of course, at that time, I mean, I'm not a big guy now, but I was seriously a small guy at that point. And as a result, I didn't really have something to do. And I said, well, I did join the swim club, and so I know how to swim. I distinctly remember the coach timing me for 100-yard breaststroke, and this was in a 20-yard pool, so I got four turns, um, and five lengths, and going like 141 or something for like 100 breaststroke, and thinking, oh my God. But that aside, at least if I was terrible, I was very enthusiastic. So anyway, I stuck with it. Obviously, did get better. But once through high school, I'd enjoyed, I've been really influenced academically by some of my teachers. And so I kind of said, well, you know what I'd like to do? I'd like to, teach math. That's what I want to do as a career. And so, I look around the coaches, and, well, they're coaches and they're teaching high school. So I'll teach high school and coach math. I did that. And I told my girlfriend that. She broke up with me on the spot. But at that point, I got recruited by a guy named Mike Jones, who was, there are only three men's coaches in the history of Eastern Michigan University. He was number two. Um, there was a guy named Bill Lewis who started the program. He was there for about 2 years, I think, maybe 3. I'd have to go check my ancient history. And then Mike took over and won an NCAA college division, which would be kind of D2 and D3 combined now. He won 3 NAI national championships, and he transitioned the team into the Mid American Conference. And so he recruited me to come swim there, and so I was there as they basically went through that transition, NAI, NCAA, and then on into the Mid American Conference in Division One, and I just sort of fell in love with the sport. And I think I wanted to emulate him, to be honest. I just was so impressed with that you could make a living doing this and having fun. And so this is great. I find out there's other things to it besides just the fun meat parts. But nonetheless, that was kind of where I got going on it. And from there, at that time, there were a couple of things about Mike that are interesting. One, he started out as a baseball player. And from there, I think he'd gone to Hazel Park High School, and he was supposed to be like the JV swim coach and the JV baseball coach or something. I don't remember the exact nature of the story. But the guy who was the head swimming coach was the head baseball coach, and he didn't like swimming. And so he said, well, I'll trade you. I'll do varsity and JV baseball, and you be varsity and JV swimming. So Mike, took over the swimming program, and then made himself into a great swimming coach. I mean, he was a constant learner. He just developed into an absolutely fabulous coach, and he was incredibly successful. As he won NAA national championships, he won an NCAA national championship, and he won about 10 Mid American Conference championships before he retired. And but that to the day he died, I mean, he was always sitting there thinking about swimming, like, how do you make someone go faster? Well, this is wrong. But that constant learning. And I really related to that, just because that's one of the things I relate to Greg about, it's like we're just kind of fellow travelers on the confused, but this is interesting, trip about everything you can think about swimming. And, it's one of those things where you've got psychology, you've got physiology, you've got competitiveness, you've got all sorts of great stuff going on that never makes it, very mundane. You could never go in and say, okay, this is the practices we did, in like 1980, and then you're in 2020 going, well, it worked in 1980. We're just going to keep doing it. We're still doing the same thing in the same way.
Right.
So basically that, and then just one thing led to another after that. But that's how I got started.
Nice. Yeah, that's great. And talk to me a little bit about that, where the sort of conference, the division was, what the landscape of NCAA was like at that time, because I think you mentioned it, how like it eventually became part of the MAC conference, and I think he grew to develop that. But like, where was that, at that point?
Well, what happened, I think, initially, and I may be off a little bit here. I'm going to give you my version of this, but
Okay.
the NCAA was the NCAA.
Mm-hmm.
So if you went to the NCAA championships, and you're at Kenyon College or you're at Denison, you're swimming the University of Southern California. Mm-hmm. You're swimming Indiana. You're swimming, that was it. This is how we do this. And so what eventually happened is that led to the arrival of the NAI, and because that provided an outlet, a more competitive outlet for anybody that wasn't like what would now be like Power 5, right?
Sure.
And it grew and it grew and it grew. So the NCAA, I think, under some pressure, said, okay, we got to do something about this. So they divided into what they called the university division, which would be, again, kind of Power 5-ish sort of programs, and college division, which would be like mid-major and D3. And then started regaining some of these schools back from the NAI. Now the NAI obviously still exists, but they then of course they went further along the line there and divided into divisions 1, 2, and 3. But in the meantime, Division 1 still existed. The Mid-American Conference was in Division 1, and so what has for the Eastern Michigan to join the Mid-American Conference, which is what they did and wanted to do, they would have to transition through all these things. So again, they spent a year in NAI, and or a number of years they were in NAI, but then they spent a year in Division 2, which was the college division, Division 2 and 3. I mean, I remember being at nationals and sitting next to Johns Hopkins, so it gives you some idea of what we're looking at. And then the next year we went into the Mid-American Conference, but I think for the first couple of years we couldn't give out any scholarships because the Mid-American Conference at that time, I think the limit was 4, and whatever the Division 1 limit or NAI limit was like 16 or something, so you've got to you got to get rid of those. They wouldn't penalize you for having them, but you couldn't like bring anybody new in for till you actually got down to 4 or less, and then you could kind of mess with it. So there's a period there where when we got in the conference, we were gradually settling lower and lower, and then it sort of righted itself, and then Mike started winning, and I think he won like the last 9 of the last 10 years he coached or something like that.
Wow. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I was curious because that was an immediate question I had, was like, how did this landscape sort of develop into that? But it makes sense. I mean, as more colleges and universities also start to surface and programs start to surface too, I think then it becomes like, okay, we need to sort of divide, these branches of powerhouses and swimming programs out so that we make a more level competitive field.
I mean, they're sort of doing that now. If with the looks of it, they're trying to make those kind of changes as we go, particularly
Sure.
with the NIL stuff.
Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. It continues to happen for sure. Well, good. And talk to me about just your early coaching years, like within the state of Ohio and sort of high school swimming. What were those years like of just sort of being a young coach? Maybe finding success at the high school level, and sort of the eventual segue to want to do this full time, take over, as the head coach of EMU.
Well, one, I loved high school coaching. I mean, honest to God, it's like the best thing ever. I mean, I just loved high school coaching. And there were frequent times over my life where I'm like, I gotta go back and do this. I did very much, it was something I really, really enjoyed. And some of my best memories of either working with athletes or some of the best meets ever, were high school meets. And because all the role models that I had, in terms of that's what they did, John Urbanchik, high school coach, Betty Reese, high school coach, I think, I say North Thornton, I think he was a junior college, but just a slightly cut above being a high school coach. Almost Paul Bergen, high school coach. That's what these people were doing, and then they would go on and they, got college jobs and things like that. And I didn't think about it in terms of that transition, but that's where they started, and that's what they were doing with all these things. So that, Mark Schubert, high school coach. A lot of these people, high school coaches in Ohio, I might add, but that's what you'd see, so that was kind of, that seemed like a natural thing. You love swimming, you get paid for, to coach them. And so, you look for a teaching job and a coaching job, and they tell you, if you can do some extracurricular thing, it makes you, more valuable as a teacher, because then they don't have to hire 2 people and all this stuff. Mm-hmm. So, I started out at Shaker Heights and loved Shaker, loved the community, loved the city of Cleveland. And, we went from being pretty average to bad. I think we ended up 10th in the mythical high school national championships or something like that in swimming world. But a lot of that was, luck. I think I followed Eddie Reese around enough clinics. He thought I was a stalker or something. It's a true story. I remember, I had great friends, that I learned a lot from. In Cleveland, there were two guys, Frank Anderson and a guy named Dick Segrist, uh, who were coaches in the conference. Actually, Dick was at Fairview, and they weren't in our conference. But anyway, they were successful high school coaches, and they actually said, "Well, when we go to the state meet, here's what happens. They're going to score 12 people, and they're going to get 30 some people in an event, and we're going to do all the prelims on Friday and all the finals on Saturday. And Friday night, what's going to happen is all those people that didn't make finals are going to be running around the hotel. So how about getting with us and getting a block of rooms, and we'll get this block of rooms in one hallway. And then what we do is we sit up all night basically and make sure nobody, watch the hotel staff chase people around with video cameras, trying to kind of keep them out of the, let our athletes get some sleep." So I said, "Yeah, sure, fine, whatever." That was fine with me. But the thing about that was these guys were great coaches. I mean, they were great coaches. I mean, Dick, I think, had won the state high school championship at Fairview. Frank had infinite number of like fabulous swimmers. And they were, maybe 15 years older than I was, 20 years older. They had a lot more experience than I had. And they would sit up all night and talk about stories and tell swimming stories and what they thought about stuff. And I would it was like a condensed, 6-year plan where that was my clinic, these guys telling me stories, I have used stuff they told me in terms of dealing with athletes and setting up lineups. And I mean, to this day, I've used stuff. I mean, it was great.
Wow.
But there were other coaches as well, and I had the same kind of things happen to me when I went to Columbus. I had amazing group of people, like I mentioned Todd Grant before, and I've got more involved with the State Coaches Association, and a guy named Joe Grosskos, who just turned 80, I think, on a week ago Monday or something. Anyway. And there was just, it was just a wonderful experience. What really happened was simply that by the time when I was in Upper Arlington, it was brutal. I mean, I was we had morning practice at 5:45, and because the size of the pool, we had to split the practice sessions in the evening between the men and the women, or girls and boys. And there were, every other week I was getting out of there about 7:15, 7:30. And then you're at a weekend age group meet. I'd be flying back from junior nationals or something, and all these club coaches are going, "Oh man, I'm going to get a week off," and I'm thinking, "Homeroom, 8:00 tomorrow." So to some extent, it got down to like, all right, I don't know how I keep doing this job at this level this long, or I can try college swimming and see what it's like. And I can always go back and just teach, right? I can always do that. So so that sort of led to my transition into, and I was just fortunate. I don't think I could have transitioned to any college job. Mike Jones was retiring. One of his conditions was that he had some significant input into his successor. I think it's very, very hard to make a transition now. As I said, all those people, John Urbanchek, everybody, high school coaches, you just can't do that anymore. They're not going to hire you. They're going to hire a grad assistant. They're going to hire an assistant coach from somewhere else. That's just the process. That's what the process has become, unless you are coaching, somebody's world record holder or something. And then, okay, that's different. Bob Bowman can go from North Baltimore to Michigan because of Michael Phelps. Bob Bowman's just an average age group coach with fairly good kids. He doesn't get looked at. I think Mark Schubert told me a story one time where he was trying to get a job at the University of Texas when he was at Mission Viejo, and they sort of blew him off because he was just an age group coach. Now eventually they rehired him, but that was kind of the gives you some idea of what you're dealing with.
Yeah, definitely. No, I mean, it makes sense. Often, yeah. I just think about the athletes. The success of your athletes can, just often have that just immense impact on sort of, your trajectory, as opposed to, just looking at you as an actual coach, right? It's just,
whether that's right or wrong, it is what it is. Yeah.
it is what it is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's great. I mean, it sounds like, the high school swimming and the amount of coaches you were able to just sort of follow, look up to, listen to, just tremendous impact on sort of your coaching and just,
and I'm leaving people out that I'm going to probably
course,
offend. If I see them, they're going to what, I didn't help you, but yeah.
no, but yeah, but I mean, you're acknowledging that it's hard. There's countless people to acknowledge. So I think that's great. And then, like, well, when you kind of assume that role at EMU, like, I don't know, what were some of those early years like of now transitioning out of high school, being, the full-time head coach of the men's program at EMU, and just maybe some of those like early learning experiences, like, okay, I need to, sort of figure this part out, or I need to do better at this. Like, I don't know, what were some maybe pivotal moments sort of in those early years?
Well, it was interesting because when I first took the job at Eastern, Mike Jones was my, in quotes, assistant, because he was actually still the natatorium director and teaching in the physical education department. Because when he had taken the job at Eastern, the way they remunerated the coaches was like, it was a 50% coaching position, 50% teaching position. So he was actually my assistant. So I had an assistant with a pool named after him, which was interesting. So he helped me out the first year, and so he was a really, I mean, it was amazing how, because whatever college you're at, there's a different kind of culture and who to see and how to get stuff done, and workarounds, and everything you can imagine. And he was, even though I had gone to Eastern, I mean, he was a wealth of information and help along those lines. He told me, though, that he realized at some point he was no longer the head coach, because he had been on the pool deck prior to practice, and we had a bunch of kids that were in the background. They were screwing around. They weren't doing anything terrible, but they were definitely messing around. And I walked on the pool deck and they stopped. And he goes, "You realize the transition was complete," or something like that. The biggest thing they probably did was they worked real hard on changing my language, which I'm trying to change back after college coaching, because there's an aspect of it where I'm like, just be real careful what comes out of my mouth sometimes, because they were very good at eliciting communications that probably were not entirely appropriate all the time, I guess is how I'd say it. But I think the biggest thing was just learning how to balance time and effort and energy, and because you're looking at, like I said, the recruiting was always changing. One of the things I did was I immediately went out and like tried to buy every, marketing sales book and learn how to be a, recruiter that I could, because that was the one thing that I knew. And then I didn't try to make anything. I knew what Mike had done, and I gradually manipulated what we were doing in the pool. So nobody, one of the swimmers, Todd Brunty, came up to me at one point later on, and he goes, "I just realized we're not doing anything we were doing before." And I said, "Well, you are, but he said, I don't know how it changed, and so I think, not coming in and just saying, okay, this is a new regime, everything's different. I was really fortunate because Mike had developed a great culture. I think if you come into a program where you've got a complete culture change, that would be an entirely different scenario where, I got to come in and just tweak things and keep it going from that standpoint. But I think the biggest thing was simply, you're managing a lot more egos. Everybody on the team was the best swimmer in the high school team, so they're expecting to be treated like they're, like the best swimmer on their high school team. The recruiting, managing budget. I mean, there was some, and just being comfortable being uncertain and uncomfortable, I think, was a big part of it. And then developing a support group. Like I said, I met Greg really early in this process. I mean, we've exchanged entire seasons of workouts a couple of times, and call up and ask somebody something about how they handled something. John Urbanchek was 8 miles away at Michigan, and We still have a great relationship. We would run daily. I'd have practice. He'd have practice. We'd meet after, like we'd meet in the, like there's down by the river, there's a park. That's about halfway between the universities. We'd meet there and run for an hour and just talk swimming. Jim Richardson, and there were a lot of great swimming stuff going on there, and a lot of people that were really helpful and fundamental in doing that. And of course, Bob Bowman showed up, about 15 years later, and so he got into our running group as well. So things went.
Mm-hmm.
It was a great place to be.
Yeah, definitely. And well, like, talk to me about just like, yeah, like how important that sort of colleagueship is, like among some of those coaches. Because I feel like that's one thing with coaching. I mean, at a collegiate level, obviously, you start to build, like you said, like maybe at that time it was a little different. You start to build more of a staff around you, so you can bounce ideas off each other. But I feel like often it can be very lonely because you're, kind of intaking all of this information, like of what went on during the day, and you have so many things going on, and you're also processing like human emotion of just working with different athletes, and maybe something that was said that's rubbing you the wrong way or whatever it is, or you're analyzing a workout. So like I feel like at times it can be really lonely, and not enough people will like sort of just kind of like express that, because I don't know, for whatever reason or another. But I don't know, what is that sort of like
Well,
colleagueship
I think
meant to
that's the
you?
only way you stay sane and stay in the business.
Mm,
I mean, honestly, when I look at, the people that I surrounded myself with, I had great staff. I mean, I've had like unbelievably great people help me over the years on my staff, and are, friends for life in like so many different ways.
mm,
Um, so, that's great. And but at the end of the day, I'm the guy that, it's the buck stops here, right?
right.
And so it's nice to have a group of people that you can talk to and be honest with, and share, doubts, concerns, you know, all manner of anxieties with, and
Sure.
they with you, who are in the same situation. They have to go. They're in the same. They're, even if they're, like your fiercest competitors, you still, that's in the pool. Outside the pool. Pete Lindsay, Eastern of Miami had, like brutal, competitive relationship,
Mm,
and yet I've lost track of the number of times that, Pete Lindsay and I they used to be Borders books, right? Big bookstores, and we would go to the bookstore together when we were out of town, and just look at books and had similar tastes in certain things. We were both interested in a lot of the same kinds of stuff. But there, you have to have those kinds of relationships. If you just live in a cave someplace and talk to your staff, and I mean, everything that's going on still rests with you. I mean, you can try to lay some of that, I suppose, on your staff and things like that. But
mm,
it helps to have somebody who really understands what you're going through, and
yeah.
then has been through it. And sometimes you can do things where, I had an athlete unfortunately killed in a car accident. And the
Mm,
first thing I did was call one of the other head coaches, and I said, "Oh my God, how do you go? How do you go through this when it happened to you?" And you know, I can't tell you how much difference that made, and what transpired after that. And just
mm,
having someone like that, whereas if you don't have that, what do? You don't, you can't. There's nothing like that you can even compare to.
right. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's yeah, it's so important. It's just so important to lean on those people. And like you said, but the buck stops sort of at you, and at the end of the day, you need all the tools to be able to sort of I don't know, just like address the team on a day-to-day basis too, and go about the process, because I think that's what you sign up for when you sign up to manage a program, to head coach a program, right?
Yeah.
So
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely. And I mean, you always actually have somewhat of an antagonistic relationship with the athletes. I mean, it's just what it is.
Mm,
I
yeah.
mean, you're trying to all go in the same direction. I mean, maybe you're the, calling the stroke rate on the boat, but, and they're rowing, but it's still, you're still, in the end of the day, the person that's, if there's going to be discipline, you're the one that's going to, be inflicting it on them, and you're the one that wrote the workouts, and you're the one that, if they do think they did what you asked them to do and they don't get the results they want, you're the one they're going to be unhappy at, and when you go through these things. And so you try to figure out how to balance all those types of things. I mean, I think I can't remember where I heard this, but I think it's valid. Is someone asked the coach whether "Well, your athletes don't like you very well," and he goes, "I don't care if they don't like me very well. I want them to like me when they're 40." And I think there's some truth to that. And the biggest thing, you have to know what kinds of, how you're going to respond to things, I guess, is how I want to say this. How to make, like, when you're putting together a staff, you could put together a staff. You felt very confident. I suppose you could put together a staff where, your assistants are very much like you. I always felt like I wanted to have people cover my weaknesses. So I try to get something to do stuff I couldn't do. But at the same time, I think I remember a sitcom one time, but this stuck with me, where the person was asking about, they had a falling out with the boss, and they asked them why they weren't firing them, and their supervisor said, "Well, if you're not very smart, you surround yourself with really smart people, and then look at what they suggest and then try to follow it to the best you can." I said, "If you're a smart person," and the character said, "I am," then I surround myself with people that disagree with me, really smart people that disagree with me, and then I try to sort it out. But I do think there's an aspect of trying to find people that maybe have a slightly different take. We're going to have the same goal. We want these people to be fast. We want them to have a great experience, but maybe they're going to take a slightly different approach to it. And I would like people like that on my staff, because I don't want to, I don't know the answers, and I want them to help. And maybe the combination of those two things are going to get us a better result than, either one of us going their own way.
Well, let me ask you this. When it came to dealing with an athlete who, let's say, was very talented, but just was, maybe just driving the team down in terms of not showing up to practices, or, maybe not being communicative, or if you just had like a really talented athlete that you knew would be a game changer for your program, or, so, like, where did you kind of draw that line? Like, how did you deal with those that, because I feel like as a head coach, you're trying to make sure everyone's, doing the right thing, and at least controlling what they can control. But sometimes you're just left disappointed by those athletes who maybe get themselves into trouble, or, aren't showing up for certain things. And so I don't know, for you as a coach, like, where did you kind of draw that line? Like, okay, I can only give you so many opportunities before I have to let you go, or whatever it was.
And I would say, probably as a weakness, I probably was on the, like, give people more chances than they should have category, just to be, I'm fair about that. But I mean, I think there's a wide range of situations, so I think it's sort of situational somewhat. I mean, and I don't mean in terms of like the skill level of the athlete, but in terms of what the real issue is. If they're not coming to practice, then I'm sorry, that's you're done here.
Right.
Some of the alcohol and drug sorts of things, sometimes actually, towards the end of my career, was sort of taken out of your hands, because the university would have policies, and you're just adhering to this. This is just what it is, right?
Right.
But for let's say a talented, but misdirected athlete, that was basically a good person, I think trying to get in their head a little bit. I mean, I would meet with as best I could, and I probably can't say I did this 100% of the time, but as best I could, I would usually meet with every athlete about 3 times a year, 4 times a year, every kid in the program. I'd meet in the fall, talk about summer, what they did, what they wanted to accomplish, what their goals might be. I might meet with them again middle of the year, kind of reevaluate where we were. Sometimes that was like you walk by them in the pool deck and you said, we're good, okay, and then you meet with them maybe prior to the conference championships or whatever their shave meet was to make sure you're all on the same page. And then I definitely would meet with them at the end of the year and talk about upcoming part of the year or summer, and how they thought about the year and what they what their takeaways were, and what the and if they were seniors, like, okay, how can we make this better, right? I mean, it's okay, tell me, you went through this, how do we make this better? But the with doing that, ideally what I'm trying to do is lock some of these people into what your goals are and what do you think it's going to take to accomplish that, because there's really not very limited choices. If you want to be Olympian, there's not a lot of simple choices here other than being there, and so you can relate. You give you a hook, right? I mean, well, you have different goals than you told me you had, but if they're doing something where it's just you're not getting the 10 100s on 130 going through the motions, but they're not interfering with somebody, and they're being a good team person, that's an easier problem. Whereas if they start like, okay, I don't want to really be here and I'm just going to screw around. I try to find places to put them in practice where they would be productive and help. And when I ran out of places, and I said, I can't push you any place where you won't screw somebody up, we'll have to part ways here. And sometimes that process took longer than it probably should have, and sometimes it worked great, and sometimes it didn't work. Like I said, it didn't work at all.
Yeah. I mean, it's tricky, right? Like you said, it's situational, but I think, often
the
as
one thing I
coaches
would say is that how good they were was never a factor.
Okay.
It was always like their impact on the team in terms of whether they if they were just being just constantly being an energy vampire, then you just can't, they can't be good enough to offset that stuff,
Right.
And at some point you just have to have I know, because I listened to Greg's talking about your non-negotiables, and I think we all have to have those, and that's one of those things. You either support the team or there are other things you could be doing with your time. Wish you well. And even the people that may not be 100% committed to being the best practice swimmers can be really loyal, supportive team people. And that's a different person than the person who just comes in and every day, why are we doing this set? I don't understand. This is stupid. We should be doing something else. I hate being here. It's like, okay, well, don't, we'll grant your wish. You don't have to be here.
Right. Yeah. It's a question that I always think about asking coaches, just because I'm always curious. And I figured, it's a worthwhile question to ask, because I think it's just a tricky situation. But like you said,
I think the problem is rule. I mean, you need rules. I mean, I think one of the problems I find with, like you're talking about, like administrators, is that we're a legalistic society, right? So you want every possible rule written down, and yet there's always some gap between the rules, right? And so at some point, having fewer rules, but sort of, so you understand, like, okay, don't hurt the team, but that could take different aspects of things. But if you try to itemize all the ways you could hurt the team, and then they find, if you got 10 on the list, they find number 11, then you say, well, you can't fire me because I wasn't, I didn't violate any of the 10 that were on the team, the team rules. That's a challenge, so you've got to figure out ways to, hold people accountable, and at the same time not create kind of a trap for yourself and for the program by taking too legalistic an approach to it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think with George Kennedy, he's like, you can wake up each day and either choose to contribute or complain, and that
Yes,
stuck in my head
right.
because it was like that's a simple way to put it. And
Yeah, we had a no
yeah,
complaining rule that I stole from somebody, and it was like, you there's no complaining. I said, if you want to register unhappiness about something, then the first rule is you have to only address it to the person that can alleviate your unhappiness. So if you want to complain about the workout, don't complain to your teammates. You
right.
go see the coach who wrote the workout, because they're the one that
Mhm.
could change the workout. And then number two, when you do that, have a solution.
Yeah,
You don't get to
right,
sit there and say, well, this set's terrible. you know well, then tell me what would be a good set today.
right.
What would you get something out of?
Mm,
And we weren't 100% about that, but I think having some sort of basic understanding of, this is kind of the process I'd like you to go through, helps.
for sure.
Everybody has bad days.
Yeah,
Nobody goes through a day without turning to somebody going, why, am I doing
yeah.
this?
Oh my
Yeah.
God. Yeah,
Yeah.
especially with all the demands of being a swimmer and a collegiate
Yeah.
swimmer.
Right. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's
It's
impossible. Yeah.
automatic. Yeah. I can't get through a day without it.
Mm, interesting. All right. Well, I'd say talk to me just about like the success that you had over the course of your career at EMU. Like, I mean, your men's program just accomplished tremendous success. In particular, just because you began as the men's coach, you obviously ended as the men's coach, and then somewhere along the way, I think it was the 04-05 season, you took over the women's team as well. So you assumed the responsibility of being the head coach of both programs. But for a while, it was that men's program for you, and so just like, yeah, talk to me about the success that you were able to really foster within that program. And I don't know in what ways, like, you could even talk about those principles, and we've certainly discussed some of them, but like, how did you just make it all work?
Well, I mean, one of the things we almost never talked about winning. I
Mm.
mean, we did. I mean, that sounds silly. Like, of course, we talk about winning, but I mean, we never made it like okay, this we're just going to win.
Mm.
And we definitely tried to make sure everybody understood. You didn't, it wasn't like you're going to put on the a green suit and okay, everything's great. Um, there was always at the end of the year, in fact, when we would get together and we would talk to them, and I would say, look, here you are. This is the last time you're ever going to be together. This is the last time this team is in existence. And next year we're going to have, 6, 8, 10 freshmen. And so a quarter or a third of the team is going to be new. Depends on this, maybe something less. 20%. It's going to be new. It's going to be a different team, different dynamics, different pecking order of things, different strengths and weaknesses. And that team hasn't won anything. And if you want to emulate teams that did win something, then what you want to emulate is the process that they went through to do it. And that process would be, again, showing up for practice, being committed, taking care of yourself outside the pool, taking care of your teammates. Um, I always thought it was funny because our residence hall suites had 4 people in them. And, swimmer A, is ill, that is legitimately ill, and B, C, and D show up, or, and then swimmer B is ill and A, C, and D show up, and swimmer C is ill and A, B, and C, show up. Swimmer D is ill. Everybody misses the alarm, so which one was getting everybody up and out the door, like on time in the morning. And that's kind of a funny kind of situation, but that kind of thing where you make sure that you're holding your goals, uh, and protecting your goals. One of the things the teams did towards the end, more than at the beginning, was they identified what their team standards were going to be, and more importantly, what that looks like. You can always sit there and say, how do I want to say this? you can always go to one of these situations and say, well, I believe in world peace, right? Okay, great. But, how exactly are you going to do that? And one of the things that, they tried to do is put that in a very concise way. How am I going to, make all these things happen? What is being, everybody wants to be a good team member. Well, what does a good team member do? I'm very, very specifically write out what, think, okay, this is what a good team member does. This is what it looks like to be a good team member. Do you tell somebody what they want to hear, or do you tell them what they need to hear? And you go through like that. So I think that's the kind of culture that we had. And over time, there is an aspect of it where, we had all the team pictures, like up on the wall, so every day you're coming to practice and you're looking at these people and you're saying, okay, am I going to be the, like not let not let these people down? I mean, I
Right.
always feel like as a coach, you've got three roles. I mean, you've got to help people remember the past and the people that have come before them, the team members, what they sacrificed, what they did, how they did it to have the success they had. You have to hold people accountable in the presence for what they're doing. And then you actually have to be able to project into the future and help people see what they're capable of. And I think trying to do that is what led to like our sustained success.
I like that piece. I'm going to use that. I already know it. I think that's a great just point of view for coaches to take in, for sure. And talk to me about just some of your maybe most memorable moments. I know it's, again, we've spoke about this off air. It's hard because you're going to leave people out. You're going to leave moments out, but I have to ask the question because it's going to make for just like maybe pivotal moments in the career at EMU that just really stick out. Like even if there was like a swim or something, or you were just like completely taken aback, like jaw dropping, that still sticks in your mind. Anything like that?
I mean, again, you get a lot of one of the ones that actually was not at EMU, but I remember we started the girls team at Shaker Heights,
Mm.
and we went in. This is a much longer story than I'm going to make it, but we went in and swam a dual meet with with our arch rival, and it was one of these arch rivals where if you beat this team, you could lose every other meet you had. we had a good year, it doesn't matter what happens. And we went in and they were like the second or third best team in the state or something in the state rankings. And we got absolutely humiliated. I mean, there was just body parts. I mean, it was just not a good thing, I mean, and I think at one point I'd forgotten to even tell all the women IMers and breastworkers that they had to touch the wall with both hands. So we had a number of disqualifications there because I just assumed they would know, right? Not true. So we had that experience, but we had a pretty good age group set up, and we knew we were getting a lot of people. And we went, there was about 8 of us, and we went out in the parking lot. We sat there and like spit on our hands and rubbed dirt on our faces and swore that, 2 years from now, we're going to get these guys. And 2 years from then, we gave them the worst defeat in the history of the program. So, but I don't know what kind of category that falls into, but from an athlete standpoint, there's been all sorts of different things, gone on. We had a guy named Mark Leonard that was a terrific distance swimmer. And he gave me a couple of different moments when he was and again, you have to go back to like this 1990 something. So, you couldn't win juniors. You couldn't even score juniors with some of the times that I'm going to talk about. But, when Mark was a freshman, I think he went, I want to say he went 15, or maybe sophomore, 15:20 or something in the mile. And he went 4:25 or something in the 500. And we went to NCAAs, and I'm all hyped up. I mean, this is going to be great. We're going to, it's like, I'm excited, and he dove in and went 4:35. And that was not a happy moment for me. I had about 3 minutes to like experience it because it was pretty obvious after about the first 150 what this is going to look like. And spent a lot of time trying to figure out what was wrong with his coach, to have this happen. And then 2 days, and then we scratched his event the second day. I was like, okay, I can't do this. And then I went and I was really happy we were in early heats of the mile, because then he wasn't going to be there when the crowd was going to be there. He went out in 4:33, ended up fifth in the meet. It's like, I was like trying to figure out how he did that.
Wow.
And he did the same thing a couple of years later. And again, put it in perspective, I don't think anybody in the U.S. had been, any U.S. citizen, there have been some international kids, that had been under 15 minutes in the mile, like in a couple of years. I mean, there were people who had done it, but the mile swimming in the U.S. wasn't doing very well. And we were running an invitational meet, and it was right after Thanksgiving, as they usually are. And at Thanksgiving, he had come in and he'd done some set, and I can't remember the set, but I want to say it was like 10, getting his open water swimmer of the world or something in the year or something, one year. But Mark was doing a set, and it was like 10 500s or something, and he got to about 10 400s, and he got to like 2 or 3, and he was just so awful. I just said, just swim continuously and get out and go home. So I wasn't really looking for anything. And then I was running around at this meet, and he was swimming, and I knew he was going to win the mile, so I wasn't paying any attention to it. And and I looked up, and he was like 4:31 or something, or there at the 4:32 at the 500, and I was doing something else, and the guy who was my assistant at the time, Carlton Bruner, came over to me and he said, "You better watch this." And I said, "Why?" He says, "He just turned at 1,000." I said, "Yeah, okay." And he said, "Well, he went 9:04." So yeah, Mark actually ended up going 14:55 or something like that. And so it was, so those are, I always like when they surprise themselves, when they do these things. We had another miler named Michelle Zambri, who only was in the mile because she told me that I had inherited her as a backstroker, and I'd swum her in backstroke all year. And she came to see me, and she said, "I swim the mile at the end of the year." And I'm like, "Why would you swim the mile?" I hate backstroke. And I'm like, you've been here 2 years, and I've coached you for a year, and you've never once mentioned that you hate backstroke. "I just hate backstroke." And I was like, "Okay, no, I'll put you," so I entered her in the mile because it didn't make any difference. I was like, we weren't going to beat anybody. So my first year with the women, and I'm warming her up, and she's going like a minute or something, and I'm like, "Michelle, you swam once in a dual meet, went 17:57, minutes, not going to cut it here." And she just wouldn't slow down, so I gave up. I said, "Fine, whatever." So she's in heat 1, lane 1 or something, because she's no time, right? And then she's like, 58 or something, and then she was 158, and then she was 258, and then she was 358, and then she was like 459, and then by the 1,000 she was like 10:01, and I'm like, like, I think she ended up about 1640 or something, and she won the meet from the, like, heat 1, so
Wow.
But we have the workout stuff. I mean, we have just warm up stuff. Delaney Duncan, when she was a freshman, we were at Akron, and she was swimming pace for a 200, and early in the year, we didn't even think we'd swim her in a 200 breaststroke, because we thought she would be like 150 freestyler or something, 100 breaststroke or 100 freestyler, because we weren't sure where 200 breaststroke was going to be ready. I think she had gone 237 or something. She might have been better than that by then, but it wasn't anything real spectacular. And so we were like, "Okay, doing pace," and she pushed off like 30.8 or 9 or something. And I just remember looking at our assistant, and we said something that, like, holy, whatever. And Delaney's like, did I do something wrong? And I'm like, well, not exactly. Just weren't prepared for that, for that swim. And I think she went 2:15 or something in the meet. And I was like, or whatever it was. But, it was really out of the blue. So there've been a few of those things over the years.
Mm. And what did it mean to, I don't know, you and the teams that captured it that year, but to win the conference title, both your men and women in the same year? Like, did that
It meant
signify?
a lot, actually. It meant a lot. I don't know, it meant a lot to them. I mean, I think the guys liked it when they did better than women. The women liked it when they did better than men. I mean, I always felt like
Right.
we had three teams, right? You got a men's team, you got a women's team, and then you got a combined team. So you're really coaching three teams when you're doing that. But
Good point.
it meant a lot to me professionally, and I sort of regret that we didn't do it, 2 years in a row, because we could have, but we won't go there. You just don't dive under the incoming swimmer. The relay exchange works better.
Oh, okay.
But but that aside, I think if you look at co-ed teams nationally, and I don't mean, co-ed schools that host a men's and a women's teams, like say the University of Texas or Cal, well, in the old days, Cal. But the actual co-ed teams, Georgia, Arizona, Michigan now, I mean, anything where it's a co-ed coaching staff. I think the thought is always that, well, under the then NCAA rules, you could actually have an additional coach, and having an additional coach must be good. But for whatever reason, it seems like having both teams perform at similar levels is really difficult. Even if they're both in the same, at the same time. I mean, they can kind of switch places, but one will be contending and one will be 10th or 12th or something like that, and then maybe it switches. But like Georgia, I think they're pretty constantly in the men somewhere at the bottom of the top 10 or the high teens. When their women were going win, 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 win. And I don't know what the dynamics of that are. I just know that there's got to be something, because it seems to be very hard to do. And so that we were able to achieve that. And even at the end of my career, the women were having trouble beating Akron in anything but a dual meet, but we were getting second, and the guys were winning, or the guys were second, so, I mean, they were felt like you had athletes that were, competing at the same level, which made it a lot easier because you could have similar goals, where I used to have a mustache. I lost my mustache because the second year I had the women's team, we went down and swam Miami of Ohio, and our best swimmer one of our best swimmers from the previous year had just retired. And this was like in November, and we got beat like 205 to 89 or something like that. And the missing points were because the exhibition people. And the two things I remember about that meet was, one, my assistant coming up to me at the time when she was a GA and saying, this is great. And I'm like looking at her like, Mars, or, and she was like, no, this is the first meet I've been, because she had swum at Eastern. This is the first meet I've ever been to where everybody wants to be here. And that's true. I mean, I post the travel squad, and, you'd see somebody, oh, my boyfriend was going to come down and we were going to do this weekend, and now I can't do it. So there's a certain cultural thing that had to change there. But they then came to me after the meet, right, and said, if we win the conference meet at the end of the year, would you shave your mustache? And I'm like, oh, hell yes. No problem. And then I'm watching the relay at the end of the year, and it sort of come down to the relay, but it was one of those things where, I think Miami had to win and we had to be third or something. And, we were winning by like 10 yards or something. And they were like fourth. And I was like, uh-oh.
It's coming off.
This is coming off, yeah.
Oh, God. Oh, that's a great story. That's awesome. That's great. I think, yeah.
I just didn't let them shave it. I was like, I'm the one doing
Oh, you
the
do.
shaving.
I love that. I think it was my head coach last year at Wesleyan, Peter Solomon, now recently retired, but he when he coached Middlebury College in the NESCAC conference, he said if we win, they had a real shot. It might have been the early 2000 seasons, I forget, it might have been '02 or something. We had a real shot of taking down Williams at this men's meet, and Williams obviously is winning the conference every year. They're the powerhouse in the NESCAC conference, and they took them down at Wesleyan. And he told the team, "Hey, if we win this, you get to shave my head on the pool deck on the spot after we win." And they won, and there comes the buzzers. They were so happy, and they just shaved his head. And anyways, I love that. I think that's a great story. Just kind of final question here. When you look back at your career, and obviously you're continuing to coach, and it by no means is an end, but I'm curious, because you have this lifeline of coaching experience. Like, what are you most proud of?
Yeah, you hit that on the outline, and I was looking at it, and it's difficult to, like, I don't, I always felt like, for instance, I hated losing more than I liked winning, so it was always this, so you win, it's like a great, it's like, you lose, and then, you like, beat yourself up for a calendar year or something. Um, but I think ultimately it's watching the athletes that I had um, become like just great human beings. I told one guy, I said, you're literally the best guy I know. I mean, I don't know a better human being than you. But I mean, and they've gone on all walks in life. I mean, we have people that are, researchers and police officers, people that have worked with, they're school teachers or they've gone on and coached, and athletic directors. I mean, they've done all sorts of things. An athlete when I was first at Shaker Heights, we were swimming a team that was just butchering us, I might add, but they didn't have anybody really very fast in the 500, and I think their best 500 guy was like 520 or something like that. And I'm digressing here briefly, but what I remember is that I had a guy who had been like 515, and I in a dual meet, and he was kind of whining to me about like, oh, like, I'm not sure, I don't feel really good. And I said, wait, we're gonna 1, 2, 3 in the 500. I don't know, and so finally I was so mad. I turned around and I said, can anybody beat this guy? And I had this 10th grader, because it was a 10th grade, and he's jumping up and down, he's waving his hand in the air and said, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it. And I said, okay, you're in. And the kid I took out was like, but he's only been like 542. I said, I don't care. He thinks he's going to win. He said, well, he did actually beat the guy. But, that was cool. But he also eventually was part of a group, won a Pulitzer Prize for, as a group for investigative reporting. And we had a kid that went to Johns Hopkins eventually. I think he's a Baylor now, but is an amazing pediatric oncology researcher. But just watching people be happy with their lives, and my retirement thing, I really didn't want to make a big deal out of it. And I got kind of sideswiped there by one of my former swimmers, Kevin Doak, who's a wonderful person. And he set up this retirement thing, and we had people back from like decades, and just watching how many people, you lose track of the number of people you impact. And some of these people are there, and they're literally like late 50s, and then you got people there that are like 21, and being able to interact with them and talk to them and see what their lives like. And I a couple of athletes actually have recently moved out here, so I see them, and still having a relationship with them. I've always felt like the thing you want to operate with is like, I want to say this, and I know this is, I'm probably misquoting it, but it's like people will never remember what you say, but they always remember how you made them feel. And I guess interacting with them after they've left, I feel like, yeah, I did a pretty good job of that, and that's the thing I'm most proud of, I think.
That's a great answer, and I think it's reflective of just being a coach, and it's like I heard this too. It's like people don't forget, a good coach. They don't forget, how that coach made them feel. And I think that's kind of what you're speaking to now, is just building those relationships, because the same is the true for the other way around. You don't forget how a swimmer or an athlete makes you feel.
Yeah. Well, we've had mutual, apology situations. I've apologized to some sprinters over the years for some things I put them through, and they said, if I'd known now, then what I know now. And then some of them came back to me and said, I'm really sorry for what I did to you, like
Right,
back
right,
in
right.
back in the day.
For
It was
sure.
such a
Yeah.
whatever. So
Mm,
yeah.
yeah. Well, I appreciate the answer. And yeah, I guess, well, I said that was a final question, but I have one more. And that is, do you have any favorite get out swim stories, or are you a fan of get out swims? Are there any that stick in mind?
I don't have a lot of them because I don't do them very often. I don't do them very
Mhm.
often. There's probably three reasons for that. One, usually I get going and I want to get things done.
Right.
And so it really got to be a situation where I feel like I need to do something different, like put pressure on somebody in it, like unsuspectingly, and then
Mhm.
stick them in a situation to help them with some of these things. Sometimes rather than get out swimming, it'll be like, okay, you got to go off the tower or something, or do a back dive off of even back dive off of the blocks. I mean, we're in 18 feet of water, so we're safe. But I mean, do something like that. My other minor quibble with get out swims is that I think there's a level of expectancy with athletes that somehow this is the end of everything. So if it's really going to be pressure, then if they make it, great. But if they don't make it, then they've got to be, there's got to be some kind, like, are we actually going to finish the other 10 1000s or something, right? And I was always had a difficult time if someone didn't actually do what they needed to do, kind of herding people back in for the last, half hour or whatever it was. But the closest things that, and I've had this happen frequently, is, having someone want to do something special at the end of a workout. And the one that really sticks out in my mind, most recently sticks out in my mind, is about a year ago. We were doing a set that was, I think, we were going 8 rounds of this, and it was 100 kick, I think 100 drill, and then 100 fast, pushing off as fast as you could go. And the kick was supposed to be hard, but I think that was being a little iffy there. But Nick Mahabir was having a amazing set. It was like, and I'm trying to okay, this is fine. But he was really swimming real well. And I mean, I think the first 100 he pushed off, breaststroke was 58, and the next one was 57, and the next one was 56, and then he pushed off another 57, then he started getting tired. And so he got out and said, "Can I put a suit on and just dive the last one?" And I said, "Yeah, okay, I want to see this." And we actually did with some other athletes. I think we had a 400 free relay going, we had some other stuff going, and he got up and dove 52.6 or something like that. And it's like, okay, that was worth doing.
Wow. Yeah, yeah, definitely. And that's it. I mean, that also kind of goes into it, is like maybe not necessarily a get out swim because of the stakes, and you said hurting people back in, but then having someone step up at the end of a practice, maybe they feel good after that and say, "Hey coach, I want to really push myself on this."
Yeah, I mean,
And
I tend to look at them that way more than I look at them like, okay, this is what you do to get out of practice.
right, right,
This is what
for
you do
sure.
to cap like a really good practice to make it an amazing practice.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Even like I think Coach Greg Perini says, like, we have too much work to do. I can't do a get
Yeah,
out
right.
swims.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true. You do.
it's like, we got
You
too
come
much to
in and
do.
you get, particularly with college, because you can't run over, right? I mean, we used to have compliance people would sit there in the stands, like, okay, it's 5:30. It's like, okay, we're done.
It's time to go. Yep,
Yeah,
for
time
sure.
to go. So with the club kids, it's like, I got another half hour. It's okay. Well,
Right. More
I'm just walking
flexibility.
across
Yeah.
the street to the condo. Yeah. So,
But yeah, 52. I mean, that's killer.
oh, it
That's awesome.
was. Yeah, it was.
Oh my God. That's unbelievable.
Well, I was
Well,
when I actually did it. as I told you before, I keep track of all his data. So I was doing his stroke count and his rate and his rotation on his turns. And when he finished, I clicked the watch to split it, which is for the end of the race, and I clicked one to stop it. And I looked at this one to stop it, and it seemed really fast, but it wasn't the 52. And one of the guys who just got done with his swim, had been on the relay, was standing there, and he'd been clocking it on the pace clock on the wall. And he was like, "Holy!" I was like, "Okay, it was he really?" Then we typed we had video, so we taped the time the video. I said, "Yeah, that was really what it was."
Yeah, no, that's legit. Wow, that's awesome, amazing. Well, Peter, thanks so much for having this conversation with me, and I appreciated getting to learn more about your, I don't know, just your coaching philosophy, how you approach the sport, and certainly your journey. Obviously, as with most of these podcasts, I have about 1 million other questions I would like to ask you, but and we've already gone over our planned hour and a half
we're
time.
closing in on
We're
closing
closing
in
in on 2 hour mark, which I think is great. I have no complaints. I've really enjoyed it. But anyway, so I'll wrap this up. But again, thank you for joining me. Yeah, and if there's anything else you'd like to add, now's the time.
No, it's been great. It's been great sharing the time with you.
Great, awesome, Peter. Well, thank you, and we'll talk soon.